Springfield Township, Shrewsbury, Cadorus, Manheim, and West Manheim Townships, and all the boroughs within, except Stan Saylor has a little piece of York Township, right outside of Red Line. But otherwise, that's the district.
Thank you, Ron. Watch the cord there. All right, I'd like to also introduce Seth Grove. You can tell us your district and what you cover.
I'd say you're going to introduce us oldest to youngest, but I'm second. Seth Grove, 196th District. I represent Warrington Township, Wellsville Borough, Dover Township, Dover Borough. Most of West Manchester Township, Eugene has one little sliver, West Manchester, one voting district, and then basically all of Spring Grove School District except for Jefferson Borough and Seven Valleys Borough.
Thank you, Seth. The next representative I'd like to introduce is Eugene D. Pasquale, and here you go.
Good evening, everyone. Eugene D. Pasquale, 95th District, central part of York County, York City in its entirety, West York and North York boroughs, all of Spring Garden Township, and one precinct in West Manchester Township. Happens to be the precinct I live in too, so it's an important one for me. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Eugene. I'd also like to introduce Stan Saylor. If you could come up here, Stan, you got a little ways to walk. Keith Gillespie was supposed to be with us tonight, but he had to cancel because his father's not doing so well. So he was supposed to be here, but Stan's here right now.
Stan Saylor. I have basically Windsor Township and Lower Windsor across the northern part of my district. I follow River South with Chanceford, Lower Chanceford, Teach Bottom Townships, across the bottom, Fawn Township to Hopewell. Then I come up and have East Hopewell and North Hopewell as well, and all the boroughs that are incorporated in those areas. I serve in the 94th District, and I'm also currently serving as the Majority Whip of the House.
Thank you, Stan. And that's all our representatives for this evening. We have one senator here. Our senator is Lloyd Smucker.
Good evening, Lloyd Smucker. Good to be with you here this evening. Appreciate the opportunity to participate. My district is the 13th senatorial district. That includes about 50% of Lancaster County and about 20% of York County. In York, it's the eastern part of the county from Springersbury, including Springersbury Township, down to Lower Chanceford. We have a district office in the municipal building in Lower Windsor, so don't hesitate to contact us at any time that we can help with anything. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Lloyd. And also, last but not least, I'd like to introduce Matt Briat with the Commonwealth Foundation.
I'm in charge of picking up the dog poop in my backyard, so my wife reminds me of that. So that's my domain.
Okay, what we'd like to do is ask the representatives and Matt some questions, and we'd like to keep the questions to 5 to 10 minutes, 10 minutes at the max. I'd like to not go to 10 minutes because we have about 10 to 12 questions. We'd like to get through all of them. So, and then if we have time for questions from the audience, we'll have some question and answers. So, Beth has the questions queued up on the. Okay. The first question is, York County schools get about 2% of their funding from the federal government, yet spend significantly more to meet federal mandates. Education is not the role of the federal government, and federal mandates have not proven to produce any positive results. The first question is, would you support a school district that decided to nullify federal mandates which they believe are counterproductive to the students or district operation? And whoever wants to go first is grab a microphone.
Actually, how it works is the federal government doesn't mandate them. What they do is say, you will follow these guidelines if you want the money. So what usually happens is they accept the money in order to follow those guidelines. So at any time, school districts can basically say, we're not going to accept those programs or those guidelines. What also happens a lot of times is there's court cases. Now the federal government is supposed to, I think it was a deal with 50% of special education funding. There are a lot of court cases that actually dictate school district policies when it comes to special education funding, because it's just not the lower, it's also gifted students. One of my school districts, Spring Grove, actually had an incident where a pretty well-to-do family wanted to send their son to, I think it was son or daughter, we'll just say child, to a pretty prestigious private school. And basically they made an argument in court that the school district didn't have the proper education to educate their gifted child. So the court ruled that the school district had to pay the tuition to go to the private school. They ended up moving to Warwick over in Lancaster. And the school district went forward and said we shouldn't have to pay these tuition charges anymore. Well, the court ruled against them and said you have to continue paying them even though the student is out of your school district. There are a lot of court cases like that that specifically dictate that special education funding. They're now court cases. So when you have your panel of judges here next week, they're very, very important because it's their rulings that dictate a lot of that stuff. I was just reading in the Pennsylvania School Boards Association magazine. It comes out once a month. And the legal ramifications to furloughing teachers. There's direct court cases dealing with every aspect of that. So it's just a part of the education that a lot of people don't understand how important the court's role in all that is.
When No Child Left Behind passed, and not getting into the pros and cons of it, but two states specifically, Virginia, which interestingly enough had a Democratic governor, and Utah, which had a Republican governor, were seriously looked at not accepting the money. And not accepting the money would have meant they didn't have to follow the rules. I mean, the way the federal government gets people to follow their rules is they stick the money out there, and to take the money, then you got to follow the rules. If you choose not to accept the money, if Pennsylvania, for instance, or Virginia or any state chose not to take the federal education money, they would then not have to follow the rules. And those two states looked at it, and I'm not saying this to be critical of those governors in the legislature at the time, just reality, I think they chickened out. And I think other states were looking to see what happened then. And once you, but the reality, and this is not, it's just a reality, once you start to get the money, it's tough to then turn it back, because then you begin to incorporate it into your budget. And then property taxes and state income tax and all that stuff begin to get impacted in either a positive or a negative way. But just to say, you're not nullifying a federal law. When I say simply, the state could choose not to accept the money, then you don't have to follow the rules. And an example like that is, and just to give it in concrete terms, the DUI laws, driving under the influence. The federal government in, I think, the mid-90s said to get federal highway money, you have to lower your DUI from 0.1 to 0.08. And as you can imagine, every state within a period of 5 or 6 years did, because of the fear of not having federal transportation dollars. So, I mean, I understand the point about not liking a federal law, but this one is, if you choose not to accept the money, you don't have to follow the rules. So it's not so much choosing to ignore the federal mandate, you have to choose not to accept the money, and then you could not follow the rule.
Eugene pretty much made the point I was going to make. It applies to other things, not just education, highway funding and other things. And I guess the other point is, remember, we say 2% because that's sort of what the average York County school gets, but you talk some of the big city schools, it's a much higher amount of money. So it's a large amount of money that we're talking about foregoing, and you're paying federal taxes, and if we don't get that money, you'll have to pay either more in state or school district taxes to make up the difference. So that's where you get into your difficulties with it.
All right, thank you. I'd like to,
Can I ask just one thing,
Go ahead,
just
Matt.
to clarify? A school district may not opt out. It has to be a state. So school districts saying we don't want to subject ourselves to federal requirements, you cannot do that. It has to be a statewide decision. Of course, the opposite side of raising the taxes